Let me ask you something that nobody ever asks. What if the person who keeps ruining your mood, the one who makes your blood boil, the one who stays in your head for hours after an argument, what if that person has absolutely no power over you? Not because they changed, not because you fixed them, but because you changed something so deep inside yourself that their words just bounce off. Today, I'm going to show you exactly how to reach that level. And I promise you, by the end of this video, you will never look at anger the same way again. Most people think anger is something that happens to them. Someone says something rude and they think, I had no choice. I just got angry. But here's the truth that nobody told you growing up. Anger is not a reaction. Anger is a decision. It is a habit your brain learned so early in your life that it feels automatic. And anything that is learned can be unlearned. The moment you truly accept this one idea, that anger is a habit, not a reflex, your entire life starts shifting. You stop being a puppet on a string and you start becoming someone nobody can shake. Think about the last time someone really got under your skin. Maybe it was a coworker who took credit for your work. Maybe it was a family member who said something that cut deep. Maybe it was a stranger in traffic who did something stupid. You felt that heat rising in your chest, that tension in your jaw, that urge to say something back or slam something down. And for hours, maybe even days, you kept replaying that moment. You gave that person hours of your mental energy, your peace, your sleep, and they probably moved on and forgot about it within minutes. This is the tragedy of uncontrolled anger. You think you're fighting them, but you're only fighting yourself. Here's where we need to start. The root of all anger is an unmet expectation. Read that again. Every single time you get angry at someone, it is because they did not do what you expected them to do. You expected the driver in front to signal before turning. You expected your friend to keep your secret. You expected your partner to understand without you explaining. And when reality does not match your expectation, anger rushes in to fill that gap. So the first and most powerful shift you need to make is this. You need to stop lending people a version of themselves they never agreed to. Most of your expectations are promises that the other person never made. And when you stop expecting people to behave according to your mental script, most of your anger disappears almost overnight. Now, someone watching this might say, okay, but what about people who actually wrong me? What about people who are genuinely disrespectful, genuinely harmful, genuinely toxic? This is where it gets really important because there's a massive difference between feeling angry and acting angry. You are allowed to feel it. You are allowed to acknowledge it. But the goal is to stop letting it control your actions and poison your hours. There is a saying by Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor who ruled over millions and dealt with wars, betrayal, and loss every single day. He said, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. He was not saying, don't feel things. He was saying your power lives inside, not outside. Let's talk about something called the 90-second rule, because this will change how you handle anger in real time. Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor, a brain scientist who studied her own brain during a stroke, discovered something incredible. She found that the chemical reaction of an emotion, the actual biological wave of anger or fear or sadness, lasts only 90 seconds in the body. 90 seconds. After that, if you are still feeling it, it's because you chose to keep feeding it with your thoughts. You kept replaying what they said. You kept imagining what you should have said back. You kept building the case for why you were wronged. You were no longer feeling anger. You were manufacturing it second by second with your own mind. The moment you understand this, you gain the ability to pause, breathe, let that 90-second wave pass, and respond from a place of total clarity instead of chaos. The practice of pausing sounds simple, but most people have never actually done it with intention. Here's how it works in real life. The next time someone says something that triggers you, instead of immediately responding, you press an invisible pause button. You take one slow, deep breath, not to seem calm, but to actually buy your brain 4 to 6 seconds. This matters because the part of your brain that gets angry, the amygdala, works faster than the part that thinks rationally, the prefrontal cortex. When you breathe, you give your thinking brain a chance to catch up. And in those few seconds, you go from reacting like a child to responding like someone who is completely in control. People who master this pause become almost untouchable. Not cold, not emotionless, just unshakable. Now let's go deeper, because pausing is the skill, but understanding is the cure. Every person who bothers you, every person who is rude or dismissive or hurtful, they are operating from a wound they have never healed. This is not an excuse for their behavior. It is an explanation that frees you from taking it personally. The coworker who undermines you is deeply insecure about their own value. The family member who criticizes everything you do learned criticism as a form of love from their own parents. The stranger who is aggressive on the road woke up that morning carrying something you know nothing about. When you start seeing difficult people not as enemies attacking you, but as wounded people acting out of their pain, your anger turns into something that feels much more like distance or even compassion, and it is almost impossible to stay furious at someone you genuinely understand. This does not mean you allow everyone to treat you poorly. Understanding someone's wound does not mean you let them keep bleeding on you. This is where boundaries come in, and this is one of the most misunderstood ideas about emotional control. People think that not getting angry means accepting everything quietly, being a pushover, letting people walk all over you. That is completely wrong. True emotional mastery means you can address a problem calmly, firmly, and clearly without needing to be explosive to be taken seriously. You can say, "What you just said was not okay," with a level voice and steady eyes, and that carries more power than screaming ever will. The person who never loses their composure is the most intimidating person in any room, not because they are cold, but because everyone can sense that they cannot be rattled. Let's talk about ego, because ego is the hidden engine behind most anger. When someone disrespects you and you feel furious, what exactly is being threatened? Your ego, your self-image, the story you tell about who you are and how you deserve to be treated. The bigger and more fragile your ego, the more people have the power to hurt you, because the more things they can say that don't match your self-story. But when you build real self-worth, not the kind that needs constant validation, but the kind that comes from knowing who you are deeply and privately, then insults simply stop landing. They float past you. Someone calls you incompetent, and instead of reacting, you think, "That's interesting, but I know what I'm capable of." Someone tries to embarrass you, and instead of shrinking, you stay grounded because your value doesn't live in their opinion. This is what it means to be truly free. There is a practice from Stoic philosophy called negative visualization, and while the name sounds dark, it is one of the most liberating tools you will ever use. The practice is this. Before going into situations where you might encounter difficult people, take 60 seconds and mentally prepare for the worst. Expect that someone might be rude. Expect that a meeting might go wrong. Expect that someone might say something that challenges you. When you have already pre-lived the difficulty, it no longer shocks you when it happens. And 80% of anger comes from shock, from the sudden gap between what you expected and what actually happened. Remove the shock, and you remove most of the anger. The Stoics did this before battles, before negotiations, before difficult conversations. You can do it before any challenging part of your day. Now, here's something that most self-help content skips completely. The people who struggle most with anger are not bad people. They are often deeply sensitive, deeply caring people who feel things more intensely than others. If you have a short fuse, it is not because you are broken. It is often because you care deeply, and the world doesn't always meet the standards you hold yourself and others to. The anger you feel is often unexpressed love or unexpressed grief. It is longing for respect, for connection, for fairness, turned sideways into frustration. When you realize this about yourself, you become gentler with yourself in the process of changing. And gentleness toward yourself is actually what makes lasting change possible. You cannot shame yourself into peace. Let's talk about a concept called radical responsibility, because this is where true transformation lives. Radical responsibility means taking complete ownership of how you feel, no matter what someone else did. Not because it's always your fault, but because your feelings live in your body, in your nervous system, and only you have access to them. No one else can heal them. No one else can regulate them. When you wait for the other person to apologize before you feel okay, you have handed them the remote control to your inner life, and most of the time the apology never comes. So you stay in pain, waiting for something that isn't going to arrive. Radical responsibility says, "I'm not going to wait. I'm going to take my peace back regardless of what they do next." This is not weakness. This is the most powerful thing a human being can do. Forgiveness is the chapter most people skip because it feels the hardest. But I want to reframe forgiveness for you in a way that might make it easier. Forgiveness is not telling the other person that what they did was okay. It is not pretending the hurt didn't happen. Forgiveness is a surgery you perform on yourself to remove something toxic from your own body. When you hold on to anger towards someone, you are essentially drinking poison every day, hoping they get sick. The bitterness lives in you. The sleepless nights are yours. The tightness in your chest belongs to you. They are fine. They are out there living their life. And you are in here, still bleeding from a wound they don't even remember inflicting. Forgiveness cuts that cord, Mom, not for their sake, but so you can finally breathe freely again. There is a specific kind of difficult person that most advice skips: the repeat offender. The person in your life who keeps doing the same thing, keeps triggering you, and doesn't seem to change no matter how many times you address it. This is where the concept of acceptance without approval becomes everything. Acceptance without approval means you stop fighting reality. You stop being surprised that this person behaves this way because you have accepted fully, clearly, without illusion, that this is who they are. You don't have to approve of it. You don't have to like it. But when you stop expecting them to be different, You stop being disappointed every time they confirm what you already know. Your anger requires the fuel of surprise. Remove the surprise, and the anger has nothing to burn. Let's go into the physical side of anger, because this is real and it matters. Anger is not just a mental event, it is a full body chemical storm. When you get triggered, adrenaline floods your system, your heart rate increases, your muscles tense, your breathing becomes shallow, your body is preparing to fight or run from a physical threat, even when the threat is just words. One of the most powerful tools you have is to interrupt this physical pattern before it becomes a spiral. Exercise is one of the most underrated emotional regulation tools that exists. Not because it distracts you, but because it gives your body a legitimate outlet to discharge all that stored adrenaline and cortisol. People who move their bodies daily are measurably calmer, less reactive, and more emotionally resilient. This is not opinion. This is neurochemistry. Sleep is another physical factor that is wildly underappreciated in conversations about anger. Studies consistently show that people who are sleep deprived have a dramatically lower tolerance for frustration. Their amygdala fires faster and harder. Their prefrontal cortex, the part that stops them from saying something they'll regret, goes offline earlier. If you have ever noticed that you are much more irritable on days when you slept poorly, that is not a coincidence. That is your biology. Protecting your sleep is protecting your peace. Some of the most consistent, unshakable people I have ever read about or studied are obsessive about their sleep, not because they are lazy, but because they know it is the foundation everything else rests on. Now let's talk about something subtle and powerful: the stories you tell yourself. Every time something happens, your brain immediately writes a story around it. Someone doesn't text you back, and your brain writes, "They're ignoring me, they don't respect me, I don't matter." A colleague gives you short feedback, and your brain writes, "They think I'm incompetent, they're against me." These stories feel like truth, but they are almost never the full truth. The person who didn't text you back might be in the middle of a crisis. The colleague who gave short feedback might have been rushing to another meeting. When you notice yourself writing an angry story about someone else's behavior, practice asking one simple question: is this the only possible explanation for what just happened? That question alone will dissolve more unnecessary anger than almost any other technique. There's a practice called perspective shifting that elite performers, negotiators, and therapists use constantly. It means consciously trying to see the situation from the other person's point of view, not to agree with them, but to understand them. When you do this genuinely, something remarkable happens. You stop seeing a villain and you start seeing a human being with their own pressures, their own history, their own fears. This does not mean everyone deserves your forgiveness or your trust. It means you stop letting someone live rent-free in your head when they are not even worth the real estate. The moment you understand someone's perspective, they lose their power to haunt you. Here's something I want you to sit with. Anger, at its deepest level, is often a craving for control. You get angry when things don't go the way you think they should. You get angry at people who don't behave the way you believe they should. And underneath all of that is a desperate attempt to control a world that is fundamentally uncontrollable. The Stoics divided everything in life into two categories: what is up to you and what is not up to you. Your thoughts, your choices, your efforts, your attitude, up to you. Other people's behavior, the weather, outcomes, other people's opinions, not up to you. And they said that all suffering comes from trying to control what is not up to you. When you truly internalize this division, truly live by it, not just intellectually understand it, you stop fighting half the battles that were draining your energy. And that saved energy becomes the foundation of a calm, powerful life. Humor is one of the most underrated emotional tools in existence. Not sarcasm, not deflection, but genuine lightness, the ability to zoom out from a situation and see the absurdity in it. Someone is rude to you in line at a coffee shop. In the grand timeline of your life, this moment is so tiny it will vanish before the day is over. The person who can zoom out, find the lightness, and move on without carrying the weight forward is someone who is truly free. Start practicing what I call the funeral test. Ask yourself, will I even remember this moment on my deathbed? If the answer is no, and it usually is, then why are you giving it your full fury today? Life is genuinely short. The people who realize this stop spending it being angry at small things. Relationships are where anger is most costly, and also where the most healing is possible. The people we love the most are often the ones we treat the worst, simply because we are comfortable enough to not filter ourselves. But every outburst of anger in a close relationship leaves a mark. Even if the words are forgiven, they are rarely forgotten, and over time, repeated anger erodes trust in a way that is very hard to rebuild. Here's the question that will save your most important relationships. Before you respond in anger, ask, do I want to be right or do I want to be close? Most arguments are not about what they are about. They are about feeling heard, feeling valued, feeling safe. When you slow down enough to ask yourself what the real need is underneath the fight and address that instead of winning the surface battle, everything changes. One thing that very few people do but that transforms emotional health is journaling about anger. Not to dwell in it, but to trace it. When you write about what triggered you, what you felt in your body, what story you told yourself, and what the real unmet need was, you start to see patterns. You start to see that your anger is almost always about a small set of core wounds that keep getting poked in different ways. Maybe it's always about feeling disrespected. Maybe it's always about feeling invisible. Maybe it's always about feeling like you are not enough. When you find your core wound, you stop being surprised by your triggers and you start doing actual healing work instead of endlessly managing symptoms. The concept of detachment is often misunderstood. People think detachment means not caring, but real detachment means caring about things without needing them to go a specific way. You can love deeply and still be at peace when things go differently than expected. You can work hard toward a goal and still be okay if it doesn't land the way you hoped. You can value relationships without needing other people to behave in certain ways to feel secure. This kind of detachment doesn't come from not loving. It comes from being so rooted in yourself that the ground beneath you doesn't shift every time the world does. This is the emotional posture of the most peaceful, powerful people you will ever meet. Let's talk about the mirror principle because this one is both uncomfortable and incredibly freeing. The things that bother us most in others are almost always things that exist in some form in ourselves. When someone's arrogance makes your blood boil, ask yourself honestly, is there any arrogance in me that I haven't fully acknowledged? When someone's dishonesty infuriates you, is there any area of your own life where you are not being fully honest? This is not about self-blame. It is about self-awareness. Because when you recognize a quality in yourself that you dislike, you stop needing to destroy it in others. The anger dissipates because the mirror breaks. This is one of the most advanced and transformative pieces of shadow work you can do, and you can start it right now just by asking honest questions. Now I want to address something specific, anger at yourself, because many people who struggle with external anger are actually wrestling with deep internal frustration, disappointment, or shame. They hold impossible standards for themselves. They replay mistakes on a loop. They treat themselves with a harshness they would never direct at a friend, and that internal anger constantly bleeds outward, at coworkers, at partners, at strangers, because a person who is at war inside is always looking for enemies outside. The path to not getting angry at others runs straight through becoming more compassionate with yourself. Not weaker, compassionate. Understanding your own failures with curiosity rather than condemnation. When you stop being at war with yourself, you stop being at war with the world. There's a beautiful idea in Buddhism about what they call the second arrow. The first arrow is the thing that happens. Someone hurts you, something goes wrong. That pain is real and unavoidable. But then we fire a second arrow at ourselves by ruminating, by blaming, by cycling through the pain over and over. And it's the second arrow that does the most damage. The first arrow hurts, yes, but it was going to hurt no matter what. The second arrow is completely optional. When you feel pain or anger, allow yourself to feel it cleanly, one time, fully, without story, and then let it pass. Don't fire the second arrow. Don't replay it. Don't build a case. Feel it and release it. This single practice will free up more of your emotional energy than almost anything else I can teach you. Here's something that will shift how you see difficult interactions permanently. Every challenging person in your life is a teacher. I know that sounds like something you'd read on a motivational poster, but hear me out. The person who pushes your buttons the most is showing you exactly where you still need to grow. If someone's criticism makes you furious, they are pointing to an area where you are not yet secure. If someone's success makes you resentful, they are showing you a desire you haven't yet claimed for yourself. If someone's neediness exhausts you, they are showing you a place where your own needs are not being met. Difficult people are not obstacles on the path to peace. They are the path to peace. Every single one of them is an invitation to become more solid, more grounded, more whole. The final and perhaps most important piece of everything I've shared today is this. Becoming someone who is not easily angered is not a destination you arrive at. It is a practice you return to every single day. There will be days when you handle things beautifully, when someone says something cruel and you breathe, understand, respond with grace, and feel proud of yourself. And there will be days when you lose it, when the pause fails, when the story takes over, when you say something you immediately wish you could take back. And on those days, the most important thing you can do is not collapse into shame. You look at what happened, you understand what triggered it, you repair what needs to be repaired, and you begin again. Every great practitioner of emotional mastery is simply someone who returns to the practice faster after falling off. The goal is not perfection. The goal is consistency over time. You came into this video today because some part of you knows that anger is costing you something precious. Maybe it's costing you relationships. Maybe it's costing you your health. because chronic anger is scientifically linked to heart disease, weakened immunity, and shortened lifespan. Maybe it's costing you your reputation, your opportunities, your peace of mind. And I want you to know something before we close. The fact that you're here, watching this to the end, means you have already made a decision. Most people know they have an anger problem and they live with it for decades, waiting for life to get easier before they do the inner work. But you didn't do that. You showed up, and showing up is always the hardest first step. The tools I've given you today, the 90-second rule, the pause, detachment, understanding other people's wounds, radical responsibility, the stories you tell, the mirror principle, the second arrow, these are not concepts. They are practices. They are muscles. And like any muscle, they grow stronger only when you use them consistently under real conditions, not just when it's comfortable. Real growth happens in the difficult moments, in the conversation you were dreading, in the traffic, at the dinner table, in the meeting room. Every time you choose the pause over the reaction, you are building a version of yourself that nothing and no one can shake. I'll leave you with this. Imagine the person you would become after 1 year of practicing everything in this video. Someone who walks into difficult conversations and stays grounded. Someone whose mood is not controlled by other people's behavior. Someone who can set firm boundaries without heat, repair relationships without ego, and move through conflict without leaving a trail of damage. Someone who is genuinely, sustainably at peace. Not because their life became easy, but because they built the inner structure to hold steady when it gets hard. That person is not some rare type you were not born as. That person is who you become when you commit to this practice. And it starts today, right now. With the very next interaction you have,